Welcome back, everybody. Today we are going to be painting up a Tzeentch warrior, or Tzeentch. We're painting up this guy. Not going to be doing anything super fancy here, just a rather normal paint job, but pay attention and you may learn a little thing about color balance and color theory. To begin with, starting off with our robes, that's the largest main portion of the model, and we are going to paint a color transition. I hope you are all familiar with the color spectrum, or basically a rainbow. Color spectrum is Roy G. Biv, which is red, orange, yellow, green, etc., etc. And we are going to follow that same pattern here. The reason being is, and the reason why those colors are in that order is because each one blends naturally into another. So we are starting off with our violet, and then using a mix of medium blue and violet, working our way up towards the miniature, and eventually we'll get to blue, and then we'll get to green, etc., etc. Depending on what actual paints you choose to use for this, hopefully you'll only have to do about one intermediate color. So, for example, violet, and then 50-50 mix of violet and blue, and then 100% blue. However, depending on what colors you use and how you mix them, you may have to make some intermediary steps, like I'm doing here, adding a little bit more blue before going on to just straight blue. As we work on the next color, we move upwards towards the miniature, leaving that darker color in the recesses. So as we start at the blue here, it's just going on kind of the highlight regions over the violet-blue mix, and then as we approach towards the hood area, it's going to be pure blue in the recesses, the base coat, and the highlight area. And then finally we finish off by adding some emerald green. I did do a couple more coats than what you see here. I initially did not want to do much green, but I decided to add just a little bit more at the edge. So now with our color spectrum, we have our violet, we have our indigo, we have our blue, and we have our green. We began from the center area of the robe, so now we need to go back there, return to our violet color, and we worked from the center up. Now we're going to work from the center down, this time going the other direction with the color spectrum, adding some gory red to our violet. Process here is a little bit more tedious than it was working our way up to green, mainly because red, and especially gory red, is a very transparent color. So it did take multiple coats to build up to a decent red. I'm omitting a few stages here so it doesn't get repetitive, but I did have to add gory red, more and more gory red, about 3 or 4 times, and also tried to make the mixture a little bit less thin so I can make it more opaque as we moved further down the miniature. We're going to finish off by adding some vermilion to our gory red, and this is as far as I'm taking it. I'm not going to go to orange or yellow because I want to save those colors for other parts of the miniature. Kind of an odd, interesting thing to note here, we have not highlighted this miniature at all. We've painted on like we are doing highlights. However, we're not making the colors lighter, we're actually doing a color transition. So we have a little bit of shade from the darker other colors in the recesses, but you know what? We have no highlighting here. Kind of cool, isn't it? On to the sleeves, the cuffs on the sleeves, and yes, he does have 3 of them. And we are going to start off with a mix of flat earth and filthy brown, now using just straight filthy brown. Did say this is the reason why I didn't want to go to orange and yellow on the robe. This is taking care of our yellow. We're going to kind of skip on the orange on this miniature. We have enough colors as it is, but this almost completes our color spectrum on this miniature. Onto his feathered mantle, and initially I was going to paint the skin feathers of his face and hands the same color as this. However, changed my mind at the last minute, decided that would be going a little bit too far, adding too much yellow to it. We are once again painting an area yellow, but we're going to do a different tone here than we did on the sleeves. So it's going to add a bit more of a brighter yellow color to our miniature, but not be the exact same shade. Started off with English uniform as our base, and then moving to plague brown, which is a bit more brown than the deep yellow that we used previously. And we have the paint a bit on the thicker side here. We have a textured surface, and we need some control because we're painting a tiny little surface area. And to our plague brown, we are going to add white for our highlights. A little blurry here, but I think you can still see what's going on. Wanted to see how close I can focus onto the miniature, and figured out that I can focus one step behind what I'm doing here. So fairly simple, one shade, a base coat, one highlight, then going back to add a little bit more shade, an orangey mix of scarlet blood and scruffulous brown, and this is creating kind of an orange shade color. So hey, look, we do have orange on the miniature now. Taste the rainbow. Now we move on to the skin, and I kind of struggled trying to decide what color would work best here. I eventually decided to go with heavy warm gray, mainly because it has a hint of purple in it, so hopefully I will bring the violet out in our robe. Also, I wanted a brighter color to just lighten up the miniature more. So we started off with a base coat of the heavy warm gray, applied a light wash, a mix of charred brown and purple, and then the wash was so light we can move right up to heavy warm gray mixed with white for our highlights. And here is a good example of need to thin your paint differently depending on what you're painting. On the head, we have a large amount of texture. We have feathers, so using a bit more of a dry brushing technique there. However, when we move to the hands, those are much smoother, so we need the paint thinner to slowly build up our highlights. So, good example, when you're mixing up your paint, don't thin it all to the same consistency. Leave some on your palette that's a little bit more opaque, a little bit thicker, and then you can transition easily between two areas like this. And then finally the beak, once again heavily relying on that yellow color we've been using, but using a different tone, trying to go a very faint yellow, desert yellow mixed with white, 3 highlights total to really pale it out so it doesn't look like our sleeve cuffs, doesn't look like our feathers. Now here is where I bugger up the entire miniature. I felt it was looking just a little bit too bland, so I decided to paint a pattern over the robes and completely screwed it up. So much so I had to go back and repaint the bottom half. I still felt that it needed a little bit more punch, so what I decided to do was increase the amount of red, make it much more bright on the bottom. This solves two problems I'm having with the miniature. First of all, it does give it a little bit more punch, and also you notice how we're very top heavy on the yellow on the miniature. By painting the bottom of the robe, not all the way to pure yellow, but at least getting it a little bit closer, helps to balance that yellow out a little bit. Also, just that very bright yellow color, I can't get too bright yellow on the robe without almost completely repainting it and taking smaller steps and transitioning quicker, but I have a bright red, so bright yellow and bright red helps to balance it out a little bit. And it's a very small thing, but I ended up painting the one boot he's wearing also a dark yellowish brown color, again hoping to balance that out a little bit. In the end, I think it sort of works. And there we go, all done. So in the end, we have a very colorful piece. Virtually every color is represented here. First, we have the robe, the robe is not balanced in color, but we have something else going on. We have a color transition, so we can forgive not having green on top and green on the bottom, for example. And just to note, I did increase the amount of green on the top. Basically, I brought the green into the sleeves as well to just make it a bit more spread out and add more punch to the robe. The yellow, it's balanced a little bit. It's still very top heavy, but I try to balance it out with the color of the grass and the boots and also a little bit in the belt. So those small areas kind of draw your eye down, so you don't have this very top heavy yellow. It kind of just sprinkles down to give a little bit more balance to the piece. I did try painting runes onto the robe, which I knew was a mistake. I tried it. I thought I could make it work. I couldn't. I had to go back and repaint part of the robe. When you have a complex pattern, you don't want to add another complex pattern onto it. I thought with the subtle color transition I could still add something to it, but I just couldn't make it work. So something to keep in mind, you never want to put, for example, stripes and polka dots on the same shirt. But there you go. So a rather simple paint job. If you're doing colored transitions, it's easiest if you stick to your Roy G. Biv. It's simple to do, and it adds a little bit of emphasis and spice on your paint job. And you don't have to go through every color like I did, or almost every color. You can just go through 2 or 3 if you like. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.
When we return to our planet, the High Court may well sentence you to torture.